Melissa said, my name is Joe Esch. I'm with Wallace Magellan Development Partners. Our firm is a real estate development company that has presently 22 different assets in a variety of different type of developments, including lot sales, lot development, mixed use, office development, public-private partnerships, a variety of different projects. Our focus in the area that I work on is public-private partnerships. David Wallace, our principal, he has over 30 years, or about 30 years experience, 1982, experience in real estate development. I've been in economic development almost 20 years. I started my career in North Dakota, which is a state that's very difficult to attract people to for economic development, I can bet you. Especially, you might hear it just cold around here. I've been in Texas since 1999. I was the first economic development director for the city of Sugar Land. Started their program and then moved up to be an assistant city manager, what they called an executive director at that time. Having parks and recreation, having the city's airport, also had started their lobbying department and their transportation planning. So tonight what I'm going to start with is public-private partnerships. There's a number of misconceptions about public-private partnership. When people look at them, they may look at them as a giant piñata. And they look at the developer as going to, when that breaks, gets all of the wonderful candy that's inside it. That's a common misconception. They also look at it and say, when it breaks, there's nothing left over for the public sector, that they get to participate and they get to provide all the benefits to the developer. They're unduly enriching. They're giving money to that nasty developer. That's also not the case. When you have a good public-private partnerships, and by the way, I'm not telling you those other two examples don't exist, because they do. There are communities that don't do it correctly, and there are developers that don't do it correctly. But they can be done correctly, and when they are done correctly, they can look like this. And this is a situation where both the development community and the public sector get the benefits they seek, that neither one could do it without the other, but together they can accomplish something that they're both proud of. Because a public-private partnership, when it's done well, the guiding principles, each of them have something they wish to accomplish. Neither one of them could accomplish them by themselves, but each of them participates in the development of the plans and the approval of plans. Everybody has a seat at the table. They'll receive benefits for their participation, and you make commitments or investments in those projects to ensure that the goals are achieved. Each has inputs and approvals and has defined roles in that partnership. You'll never hear us say that the public sector should participate in a public-private partnership unless the goals that you're seeking to accomplish can be achieved, and the return to the community for your investment, be it the county, be it the city, or whatever governmental entity that you're talking about, exceeds the benefit of that. The benefit of the project exceeds the cost. Those benefits may be received in both direct and indirect means. They may be both tangible and intangible. On the direct side, we can all see those. Sales taxes, property taxes, fees, jobs, other things that you can measure. Intangible, still the need of the community. It also may be a community icon. In Sugar Land, prior to this being built, this is Sugar Land Town Square. Sugar Land Town Square is a 32-acre development that you'll hear a little more about. Prior to this being built, in Sugar Land, which was a community of about 160 years ago when it actually started. It started when some people brought over from Cuba and they planted some sugar cane, and they came back and the sugar cane growing, like, hey, there's a business here. And over time they built what became Imperial Sugar, and that became the city of Sugar Land. It was a company town until it was incorporated in 1959. And in the 1920s they built a building called the Char House. It was called the Char House because they used bone char, basically crumbled up bones, as a filtering mechanism to filter the liquid sugar through and clean it before they put it in crystallized form and sell it to people. So the Char House was the image of the city. You drove down Highway 90, and that's what you thought of when you thought of Sugar Land. But Imperial Sugar closed in 2003. And when this was built, this became the new icon. Now that is the icon of the community, and that's what helped us as a city attract companies like Minute Maid, whose world headquarters is in Sugar Land. It's the only headquarters of Coca-Cola outside Atlanta. This is the project that helped us do that, among other things. So essentially, because I'm getting ahead of myself, a public-private partnership won't make a bad project a good project. Never happened. But it will make a good project possible if there's a good foundation. And that foundation has to be on good business sense on both sides. Some of our examples, this is another picture of Town Square, variety of dining places, other retail establishments. The Sugar Land Marriott, part of Town Square. Town Square is 32 acres, over 500,000 square feet of Class A office space, a 300-room hotel with a 60,000 square foot conference center, 160, 170 apartments that are in Town Square, and over 240,000 square feet of retail. It has a 1.2 acre plaza, and that's the amenity right here in the center with this fountain that we didn't think as much of, we didn't measure it, but the impact of it has been the most as that project has gone on. Why? Here's why. It became a gathering point. When we talk about this project, we're talking about creating some destination activity center. We're not saying we're going to transport this to this community. What we're saying is that each community has a different identity, has a project of itself. And when you can create those types of activity centers, that's about 8,000 people in Sugar Land Town Square on New Year's Eve. That became the community's icon for itself. Movies Under the Moon, Sugar Land Superstar, which was the community's version of American Idol. It became a place that the people came together to gather, and for your downtown celebration, some of the things that we do there. In fact, we'll back up. When I first got to Sugar Land in 1999, there was a planner in the planning department, a young lady. He said, "Why would you move here? Sugar Land has an ordinance against fun." It had very little establishments to go out and do things. It had no place to gather. It had shopping, and basically you were a suburb of Houston, and you had places to work and places to live, but there weren't places to do things for all ages. With Sugar Land Town Square and a few other elements that came in, this is what started to change that. And it was important not just for attracting the youth back, it was important for our economic development efforts, because what we found was companies wanted a place where their people could not only work and live, but could have fun. Work, shop, play, live, recreate, invest, learn. They wanted the total gambit, even though you were next to Houston. There are other things that you're not going to have that you can go into Houston, but this is one of the things that we're looking at. And there are those that said, we're not Sugar Land. No one would say you should be. But those principles still apply in Amarillo, as they do in Tulsa, as they do in Waco, as they do anywhere. People want to have fun. People want to do things and want to go places and enjoy themselves. The impact, this is the city's tax rate of Sugar Land from 1990 to 2010. About 50 cents, it spiked up to about 1994, and then what happened was the first Colony Mall was built. And why is that important? Because it is a public-private partnership. There was a sign up on posts that said mall coming soon. And it stayed there for years, and the posts rot off and the sign would fall down and they put up another sign. It said mall coming soon. The mall came when the city invested $15 million in a public-private partnership to make that project happen. People were arguing the private sector is going to do it anyway. We don't need you. It didn't happen until the city put $15 million in it. And after that, the first year was open, the city had about a $5.5 million return from new sales tax revenue. Also, from 1999, the year the Economic Development Program started, and after Town Square, you'll see that we went from $4.5 billion of total property value assessed to over $9.2 billion. On top of that, our sales tax collections grew from $20 million total to over $40 million. We had over 5 million square feet of retail finally built out. And the city's public-private partnerships, the Catalyst projects, like what we're talking about here, help do that. We're not talking about changing Sonsi or Georgia or anything like that. But do you realize, one of the things that when Melissa said, would you have an interest in coming to Amarillo and doing a project? And we started looking, one of the keys to a public-private partnership that's successful is a well-managed community. The average, as I'm sure you know, the average median household price is about $125,000, which means about $360 a year in city taxes. That's how much you pay in city taxes. And for that, you get police, fire, parks, streets, roadways. You get a whole bunch of services. On top of that, You've created an activity center and some things that you already have, that over 60% of the sales taxes that are collected in this community come from people who don't live here. And this number here, having these destination activity centers, is also what helped put our city tax rate further down. By being, even though we're next to Houston, being a regional trade location is helped what drive the community. It also helped us attract jobs. From 1999 until 2009, we grew almost double, almost to 49,000 jobs, primary sector jobs. While Houston stayed flat, while there was minimal growth in Texas, and Fort Bend being the second fastest growing county in the state of Texas, was benefited by Sugar Land, but Sugar Land outpaced the entire county. Let me tell you about Waco. The first part I was telling you about was from our experience on the public side. David Wallace was mayor for 3 terms and on council for 1 year prior to that. I was the economic development director, then also assistant city manager, executive director, same thing, for that time period until I left. When David was mayor, about 2003, he gave a speech on water and wastewater in the city of Waco. As he came out of the convention center with the then mayor, the mayor said, "Well, David, what do you think?" And he looked around, he saw a whole bunch of boarded up warehouses and windows. Downtown Waco, I don't know if you were there, if anybody had been to downtown Waco at that time, was kind of a dead zone. In fact, there was an unwritten rule for incoming freshmen at Baylor: thou shalt not go west of I-35, because you will get robbed, you'll have bad things done to you. It's not a good experience. But to have crimes against people, you have to have people. And there were less than 50 people living downtown in Waco at that time. With the downtown development that we worked on here, by the way, this is a rendering that was put forward at the time that this was developed. Now, why do I show this? Because I want to show you the conception to reality. One of the other accusations that you'll oftentimes heard is it's a bait and switch. What people will show you is not what gets developed. That's what gets developed. That's what was promised. This is loft over retail. This is a chamber. This is the first LEED certified chamber in the United States. It's built on our project. This park, lights didn't work. This is right next to City Hall. There was no one downtown. We put in student housing. We had lofts over retail. We had restaurants. We had a variety of things in the area. We invested $80 million. As a part of that project, now there are over 600 people living downtown Waco that are in our assets alone. Picture, this is a better, closer picture. This was a retail, because back in 1953, where I started this story was when Dave walked out and he was talking to the mayor and he said, what happened? They found out that in 1953 a tornado had come through downtown Waco, killed a few hundred people and actually damaged the downtown, and it never really rebuilt. And so over time, the city acquired a lot of land through tax repossessions, and there was not a lot going downtown. And so this was one of the buildings that was actually outside the city, not owned, but our firm purchased it and redeveloped it to over 100,000 square feet. It has office in this section, and retail and restaurants. And it's got Graziano, the Diamondbacks. There's also a Crickets, which is a pub. Inside the warehouse, we kept the architecture and find out how we could work in it to keep the character of the community. Sugar Land, which was a new community, much of Sugar Land's downtown was torn down by the city, and so you had, and the design standards are going on here, I kind of chuckle because in Sugar Land you can have any color you want on a sign as long as it's white or black. I call it individualistic homogeneity, which means you can look like whatever you want as long as it's like the rest of us. It's new. It does not have a variety of character. What's wonderful about your community, what's wonderful about the Herring, what's wonderful about the Barfield or Santa Fe building or whatever, it has a character that has been built over time. It's a fascinating thing that you cannot just reproduce. So this